everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You guys asked for it, so today we're going to be talking about e-waste.
Oh, yeah, it's a big one.
And we have got a ton of research to go through. It's pretty fascinating, actually. The goal today is to go beyond the basics and really get into the nitty-gritty of this growing problem. We're going to be exploring some of the hidden costs, the role the tech industry plays, even some potential solutions like the right to repair movement.
A lot of different facets to this issue, for sure.
You know, when we were prepping for this, it really struck me how something as simple as an old phone in your drawer connects to so many bigger issues. We're talking environmental impact, economics, even social justice. It's pretty wild.
Absolutely. It's all interconnected.
Yeah. So let's start with something I think we can all relate to. I bet you've got a drawer, maybe a box, maybe even a whole closet full of old gadgets you just can't seem to part with. I know I do. Like that old iPhone 8 with the cracked screen, a tablet you got for free with a Verizon promotion. What even is that thing?
Oh, I've got one of those.
Yeah, exactly. Or like that LG G4, the one with the removable battery. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
The good old days.
But it's like a graveyard of forgotten tech, and it really makes you think about the bigger picture, all those devices represent a much bigger global issue.
They do. It's kind of shocking when you realize how much e-waste we generate. Just give you an idea, in 2016, the world produced enough e-waste to equal the weight of 4,500 Eiffel Towers.
4,500 Eiffel Towers. That is just wild. So what happens to all of that e-waste? It doesn't just disappear, right?
Well, sadly, a lot of it does end up in landfills. We're talking about 60%. Only a small percentage gets recycled domestically, something like 10%. And then another big chunk, about 25%, gets shipped off to developing countries.
Wait, shipped off? Why are we sending our waste to other countries? Isn't that just exporting the problem?
Well, yeah, in a way it is. But it often comes down to economics. See, e-waste, even though we think of it as trash, it actually contains a lot of valuable materials. The UN has estimated that there's over $67 billion worth of precious metals that are thrown away at e-waste every single year.
Wow. So it's actually treasure in the trash, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And so instead of properly recycling it here, which can be expensive, a lot of developed countries choose to just ship it off. It's cheaper, but it's definitely not the ideal solution.
So what happens in these developing countries? I mean, are they properly equipped to deal with all this e-waste?
Well, that's where things get really complicated. The conditions in many of these recycling centers in developing nations, well, they're not always safe. I mean, you have workers who are dismantling electronics without the right safety equipment, exposing themselves to some pretty toxic stuff, heavy metals like lead, mercury, cadmium, and they're often using really harmful practices to extract valuable materials, burning circuit boards, using harsh acids, all sorts of things. And all of this poses serious risks to both human health and the environment.
That's heartbreaking. It makes you realize the human cost behind our, seemingly innocent discarded gadgets. And I imagine all those heavy metals ending up in landfills, that can't be good for the environment either, right?
You're absolutely right. Those heavy metals, they don't just stay put. They can leach into the soil and water, contaminating the environment, and even impacting human health. It's kind of a vicious cycle.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about the role of the tech industry in all this. Because I feel like we see all these ads and marketing campaigns about sustainability, recycling programs, but are companies like Apple, Samsung, are they really doing enough to address this growing problem?
Yeah. Well, it's a complex question. Some companies are definitely taking steps. For example, Apple has removed chargers from its iPhone boxes. They say it reduces their carbon emissions, but...
But isn't that kind of like a small step in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, that's a valid point. I mean, are those small steps really making up for the impact of, constantly releasing new phones and encouraging people to upgrade every year?
Right. And then there's planned obsolescence, where devices are intentionally designed to become unusable after a short amount of time, to push you to buy the latest model. Are we really supposed to believe that those shiny new phones are designed with easy recycling in mind?
It's a good question. And unfortunately, the answer is often no. A lot of smartphones are still made with components that are glued together, making it extremely difficult to take them apart and recover the valuable materials for recycling.
It's like they're being designed for the landfill from the start, not for a circular economy. And then you look at how many new phone models are released every year. It's insane. In 2020, Apple released 5 new iPhones and Samsung put out 15. It's just a constant churn of new devices.
It's a lot, that's for sure. It makes you wonder if there's a better way.
Exactly. And that brings us to the right to repair movement, which has been gaining some serious momentum as a potential solution to all this e-waste. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
The right to repair movement is pretty fascinating. It's basically advocating for giving consumers the right to repair their own devices instead of being forced to replace them. Imagine if you could easily fix your own phone, replace a battery, keep your electronics running for years, maybe even decades longer.
That would definitely reduce the amount of e-waste we generate. But where do the tech companies stand on this? Are they embracing right to repair?
It's kind of a mixed bag. Take Apple, for example. They have taken some small steps toward repairability, making some parts modular and using pull tabs for easier battery removal. But they still use proprietary screws, making it harder for consumers and independent repair shops to actually access the device.
So they're taking baby steps, but still holding on to control.
Yeah. And they claim to lose money on repairs, but you have to wonder if that's because their designs make repairs so difficult and expensive in the first place.
That's a good point. What about Samsung? Where do they stand on repairability?
Samsung's repairability scores from groups like iFixit are actually often even lower than Apple's.
Oh, wow. So it seems like we can't necessarily rely on the big tech companies to make repairable devices. So what can we do as consumers? Are we just doomed to keep contributing to this e-waste problem?
Not at all. There are definitely things we can do, both individually and collectively, to make a real difference.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's talk solutions. But before we do that, I think we need to understand the whole process of e-waste recycling. Because it's not as simple as just tossing your old phone in the recycling bin, right?
You got it. E-waste recycling is actually pretty complicated. It really is. It's not like your regular recycling where you just chuck everything in the bin and it's good to go. E-waste is made up of a whole bunch of different materials, and they each need to be dealt with in a specific way.
Okay, I'm starting to see why it's so tricky. Can you give us some examples?
Sure. Take lithium-ion batteries, the ones in our phones and laptops. If those aren't handled properly, they can actually be a fire hazard.
Oh, wow. That's a bit scary.
It is. So they require a very specialized recycling process. Then you've got those tiny but super strong rare earth magnets that are used in phone speakers. Those are incredibly difficult to recycle.
Really? I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, and a lot of the methods that are currently used involve some pretty nasty chemicals, things that can be harmful to the environment.
Okay, so there are a lot of challenges with e-waste recycling. Are there companies out there that are, doing it right, that are tackling this in a responsible way?
Absolutely. There are some real pioneers in this field. One company that stands out is ERI. They handle a huge amount of the e-waste in the United States.
Oh, I've heard of them.
Yeah, they collect devices from all sorts of sources, individuals, businesses, even the manufacturers themselves. And their process is pretty impressive. They start by making sure that all personal data is completely wiped from every device.
That's good to know. I've always worried about what happens to my data on old devices.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. So they take care of that first. Then they test each device. Anything that's still in working order gets repaired or refurbished.
So it gets a second life.
Exactly. And for the devices that can't be salvaged, they're carefully broken down to recover as much as possible. We're talking steel, plastic, aluminum, even precious metals like gold and silver. They have a zero landfill policy. So everything's either reused or responsibly recycled.
That's fantastic. It sounds like a great model for a circular economy. But you mentioned earlier that those rare earth magnets are a real problem for recycling. Are there any new innovations that address that challenge?
There are some really exciting developments. One that I find particularly interesting is the work of Ikenna Nlebidem and his team at Ames Lab.
Ames Lab? I don't think I'm familiar with that.
It's a national laboratory affiliated with the Department of Energy. And they've come up with this amazing method for separating rare earth materials from e-waste. And get this, they do it without using any harsh chemicals.
Wow, really? How is that even possible?
So they've developed this process where they basically dissolve the materials that contain the rare earths, leaving everything else intact. And then they can collect and recycle all the different components. The rare earth materials that they recover are incredibly pure, and they can even extract cobalt, which is another valuable element that's often sourced in really unethical ways. But the best part is that the whole process is environmentally friendly, no hazardous waste involved.
That's incredible. It really shows that innovation can play a huge role in creating a more sustainable future for e-waste. But even with these amazing advancements, it still feels like such a huge problem, Where do we even begin to tackle this?
You're right, it is a big challenge. And I think the responsibility lies with both the tech companies and with us, the consumers. The companies need to start designing their devices with repairability and recyclability in mind.
I agree. They need to be part of the solution.
Absolutely. And we as consumers have to be more thoughtful about how we're consuming technology.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What can we as individuals actually do to make a difference? I mean, besides hoping that the tech companies get their act together.
Well, there are actually a lot of things we can do, and some of them are really simple. First and foremost, try to repair your devices instead of automatically replacing them when something goes wrong.
So like if my screen cracks or my battery starts dying quickly.
Exactly. There are so many resources available these days. You can find videos online, there are forums where people share tips and advice, there are even repair cafes popping up in some cities where you can go and learn how to fix things yourself.
Oh, I love that idea. Repair cafes. It's like a community coming together to fix things. It's very cool.
It is. And it's a great way to learn new skills and save money. If you do need to upgrade to a new device, consider donating or selling your old one. Give it a second life. And when a device has truly reached the end of its road, make sure you recycle it responsibly.
So where's the best place to recycle e-waste? Should we just throw it in with our regular recycling?
It's actually better to find a specialized e-waste recycler. Look for ones that are certified by e-stewards. Or you can also take your devices to drop-off points at stores like Best Buy and Staples. They have programs in place to make sure that everything is handled responsibly.
Those are some great tips, very practical. Any other words of wisdom before we wrap things up?
I think the most important thing, and this is where we as consumers really have power, is to buy less stuff. Resist the temptation to upgrade to the newest model just because it's new. Hold onto your devices for as long as you can, and use your purchasing power to support companies that are taking steps towards sustainability and repairability.
I think that's a great message. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by this problem, but it's really encouraging to know that we can all do our part to create a more sustainable future. What's the one big takeaway you'd want our listeners to walk away with today?
I think a big part of it is shifting our mindset.
Yeah.
We've gotten so used to this take, make, dispose model. We buy something, we use it for a while, and then we toss it out and get a new one. That whole linear economy.
Right, and that's definitely not sustainable.
Exactly.
Hmm.
We need to move towards a circular economy, where resources are kept in circulation for as long as possible. Products are designed with their entire life cycle in mind, from where the raw materials come from to what happens to them at the end of their life.
So it's not just about recycling, it's about rethinking how we do everything, right? Like how we design things, how we manufacture them, and how we use them. I see it's a much bigger picture than just focusing on the end of the line.
Exactly. And it's about looking beyond just the shiny new gadget and really understanding the true cost of our technology.
Yeah, that's a good point. We often get so excited about, the newest phone or the latest gadget, but we don't always stop to think about, like, where did the materials come from? How was it made? What are the environmental and social impacts?
Right. And those impacts, they go way beyond just the environment. They have social and economic consequences as well. Remember, we were talking about those workers dismantling e-waste in unsafe conditions. Our choices as consumers, they directly affect people's lives and livelihoods.
It's a good reminder that we're all connected. What we do here has an impact on people and places all over the world. So where do we go from here? How do we actually create a more sustainable relationship with technology?
Well, maybe a good place to start is to just imagine a different future. What if, instead of being designed to become obsolete, our devices were designed to last, to be easy to repair, and for their materials to be fully recovered and reused at the end of their life?
That sounds like a pretty awesome future to me, a world where we're not constantly bombarded with new gadgets and where quality and durability are valued more than just having the newest thing, where we see our devices as investments, not disposable items.
Exactly. And it's a future that requires collaboration, where tech companies, recyclers, policymakers, and consumers all work together to build that circular economy we were talking about.
It's ambitious, but it also feels hopeful, And it starts with each of us taking action, even small steps, like being more conscious about what we buy, supporting companies that are doing things the right way, and just advocating for change.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's not about feeling overwhelmed by the problem. It's about feeling empowered to be part of the solution. Every choice we make, no matter how small, it all adds up.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today for this deep dive into the world of e-waste. It's been eye-opening, for sure. We've learned about the scale of the problem, the hidden costs of our technology, but also about all the positive things that are happening and the steps we can all take to make a difference.
It's been a great conversation. Remember, the future isn't set in stone. It's something that we create together through our choices and actions.
So stay curious, keep learning, and let's build a future where technology works for both people and the planet. Thanks for listening.
If this tech tutorial was helpful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. For more detail, you can visit our blog website www.evergreentechtips.com.